morning, good morning. It is wonderful to be here with you all. What a fabulous facility this is. I can't wait to poke around. I'm glad there's some time on the schedule. When I looked at the schedule, by the way, and I saw that the keynote address was scheduled for 10 to 11, don't worry, I'm not going to take that long. I would like to talk about some things of, I think, mutual interest for about 20 minutes or so. And unscripted, I've got to start off with, please let your legislators know that they shouldn't use the legacy fund. And by the way, is this on or am I, can you hear me in the back okay? Well, it's a huge pleasure to be here. In August, our board at the Minnesota Historical Society took its annual 2-day Minnesota history trip, this year to the northeastern part of the state. And of course this was an inaugural trip for me. We were overwhelmed by the diversity and richness of the stories being told in Two Harbors and Duluth and all along the way. We boarded a tugboat built in 1895, saw a granitoid street, ventured inside the cells of a county jail. Luckily, we did get back out. It was pretty grim though. We toured the lighthouse being used as a B&B, had lunch at a former ironworks, admired a one-room schoolhouse that had been lovingly painted by local residents. It was especially inspiring to hear from the people working on these projects. And what we saw at every step was energy, courage, imagination, persistence, the results of sheer hard work. I tell you this morning because I know that you all are in this same tribe of history warriors. You have that energy, courage, imagination, and persistence, and you work terrifically hard. And you do your work to benefit the people of Minnesota. I am struck by how Minnesotans care so much and so deeply about our history. And this has always been so. You know, to me, it's interesting that the Minnesota Historical Society to the year is 50 years younger than the New York State Historical Association. That the earliest citizens of the new Minnesota Territory thought to found a state historical society as one of the first acts of the first territorial legislature is just astonishing evidence of this. From the founding moment, history's been a concern of the state. And since the early 1920s, when a state law was adopted to allow county governments to fund historical societies, history has been a concern of our counties as well. Although a handful of local historical societies were founded earlier, such as the Goodhue County Historical Society in 1869, it wasn't until Solon J. Buck became the first professional director of MHS in 1914 that the modern era of local history gained traction across the state. He had trained with the legendary historian and local history champion Clarence Alvord in Illinois. It was Alvord who had opened Buck's eyes to the importance of field services to local history. 2 years after he became director, Buck initiated the Field Services program at MHS to help residents across Minnesota organize their own close-to-home historical societies. And working with William Culkin, MHS field agent and a former Duluth legislator, Buck helped to organize the St. Louis County Historical Society in 1922, the Lake County Historical Society the next year, and the Cook County Historical Society in 1924. Buck himself often took to the dusty roads in his own car to meet with people who were interested in local history. That ambitious effort continued under succeeding directors until the people of every one of Minnesota's 87 counties now claim their own county historical society. So it's no accident that today Minnesota enjoys and benefits from a vibrant network of local history organizations. Look at this. You are the envy of your peers in other states, and you consistently win awards, for example, from AASLH, which, if you look at the past 10 years, has given about 10% of its achievement awards to Minnesota. Your work is also accredited by AAM, Stearns History Center being the first historical organization in Minnesota to be accredited by AAM. MHS was the second. Where do we, who have inherited this wonderful legacy, stand today? What is our future together? Well, everyone seems to agree that we're living at a critical juncture of far too interesting times that requires rethinking our priorities and how we use our resources. How can we prepare our organizations for the future, and how can we do this together? And I just might footnote that by saying, you know, when looking at resources, for example, from the state, if you look at the core program and operating funding that MHS receives from the state, over the last 10 years, when the successive reductions really began, we have about half the number of employees now that we had funded with state dollars just 10 years ago. But I want to reinforce to you our commitment to providing field services. When we look at our priorities, this is one of them. We have a foundation of 95 years of working together. Now, there have no doubt been rocky times during this long period. There are in all relationships, let alone relationships nearly a century old. But as we move forward, I believe there's much we can accomplish together. I asked David Grabitsky how many miles Field Services puts on the MHS cars that are dedicated to this work. He said, I haven't taken the time to keep track, but since May 1st of this year, when 2 new vehicles came online, he and his crew have logged 24,000 Minnesota miles. So what do they do when they do that? What do they do on the road? First, he tells me, they help share up-to-date technical information that is needed to align our work with best practices. Technical information provided through professional meetings, online resources, even dial telephones and letters, and importantly, on-site visits. There's nothing like being able to talk face-to-face in the place where history happens and is delivered. Second, Field Services helps to build and maintain the network of local history organizations throughout the state. Perhaps your neighbor or another colleague in another part of the state has solved a similar problem. Field Services helps to put you together. I frankly think that this is a very important thing. Since I entered the field, I have always found being connected to a network within my state or through AASLH has been invaluable. There's nothing like being able to pick up the phone and call someone you met at a morning like this and saying, to paraphrase Ben Leonard, holy crap, I'm dealing with this problem. Have you faced it, and what did you do? You know, that's one of the best resources that we have, each other. Third, Field Services can help you find appropriate sources of funding. The Society's grant programs have been providing direct assistance for local projects since 1969. Field Services also publicizes grants and deadlines for non-MHS administered grants and can provide help with the application process. The mission of Field Services can be summed up with the words on a sign that sat on historian Reuben Goldthwaite's desk. We aim to be useful. Whether it's questions about care of collections, bylaws, boards, staffing, infrastructure, call us. We continue to aim to be useful to you. We also face some larger common challenges and opportunities. Let me just ask, do we have in this room any alumni from the Seminar for Historical Administration? Okay. I'm going to talk to the new class Sunday. And earlier this week, I sent the new class an email. I'm supposed to work with them on issues that we face, emerging issues, the future. And said, email me back just very briefly, very succinctly, and tell me what you feel, what is the most important issue you personally face day to day in your work? What is the most important issue your organization is facing? And looking ahead, what do you see as the most important issue facing the field in the near future and the far future? I'll give you a little thumbnail profile of what those responses were from 15 people from all kinds of history organizations around the country, because there was a lot of commonality. So the first question, what is the most pressing issue you personally face day to day in your work in a history organization? What do you think is the essence, the most commonality in those 15 responses?
Financing.
Funding.
Funding as it pertains at the very personal level. And how did they translate that? Well, for example, one person said, I'm now doing the work of what 3 people used to do in my organization. I do not have the personal capacity to get it all done. I am not finding it that I'm able to make the decisions daily in my time management to decide how much I spend on this or that. And that sentiment was echoed by probably more than 2/3 of those 15 respondents. It all came down to stress, time management, being asked as resources shrink and staff shrink to do more, and actually to do more out of what you might have been trained to do. And as several said, what this means is I never can find the time to think and to plan on how we're going to tackle the big issues. So, what do you think one of the things is we'll talk about Sunday on the micro level? You know, as professionals, if we don't successfully, at our level, find the time to think and to plan ahead and find the others who will then help us make it happen, who knows what our future will be. I mean, that is really one of the most important things that we've got to do. And somewhere in our organization, somebody thinks enough to send, for example, you here this morning, or in their case, someone in their organization thinks highly enough of them that they're taking 3 weeks off to go to a seminar. So that's ally number 1. And even if it's an hour a week, if we're not trying to think ahead, nobody else is going to think ahead. And if we don't know where on the horizon we're headed or how we're going to get there, nobody else is going to tell us. So it's just one of those things that we have got to do as individuals, as leaders in the profession, the person in our organizations that people look for in terms of where are you going, how are you going to get there. That's just one that we're going to have to chin up to. What's the most pressing issue your organization is facing? What do you think the response, most common response
is? Space for collections and storage.
That's a piece of it. And it was reflected, for example, in one person's comment, my organization has been neglected so long by the leaders in our community and our political leaders that it's going to be a really steep climb up in terms of adequate facilities and storage. I would say if you lift up a little bit from that, it kind of relates to what you said earlier. Sustainability, almost survival. I mean, I think survival is sort of the course part of it, but people are simply concerned about how their organizations are going to continue to make it. And can certainly understand that. When you look at the environment in which we're operating, the national, well, the world, the national, the state, our local economies, and what that means for us. I was, you know, you can, every day you can get pretty sophisticated explanations for where we are and the slowness of the recovery and the outlook. Our investment committee met a couple of weeks ago, and I was struck by how the investment manager who chairs our investment committee summed up the economic outlook. We are in for a prolonged period of muddling through. You know, it may not get better, and it could get worse in the years ahead. This is not one of those recoveries where, you know, we really see it happening right now. And Lord knows, in Minnesota, where we kicked the can down the road on a structural solution to our state budget in terms of state funding, that we can't be particularly optimistic. And so, of course, we're all worried about sustainability. And I think it puts more pressure on us as leaders in our organizations to look at how we're funded and how we can strengthen the sources of income that maybe be less strong, earned income, contributed income, public support from county or state. And it also puts stress on us in terms of deciding on priorities. With shrinking resources, what are the things we're going to focus on or emphasize, understanding that we can't aspire to do everything excellently. And maybe A and B can be the focus, and C, just to manage expectations, we're only going to be able to do okay. And as sad as it is, maybe D, which we've always done, is simply less important. And if we're going to do A and B at this level and C at this level, we're going to work with partners over here to help them take over D. Otherwise, we're just stretching our resources too thin, which goes back to you, me, and that micro person level. You're going to burn out and or not be able to provide the leadership that the organization needs. But in response to the query about what is the most important issue facing all of us in the years ahead, I was again struck by the commonality of responses from these folks who have never met each other and are working in different places all across. And there's an old 1960 word that came out in so many of their responses. How do we continue to be relevant? What difference are we going to make? What meaning? What will people see that we're doing that's meaningful? How will we be relevant? How will we connect with people in this world that's ever changing? How will we connect with a population that is increasingly diverse and have not been the museum goers in the past? How are we going to be able to afford the technology that young people who will then become middle-aged people, is second nature to them? They're not going to patronize institutions like ours that can't keep up with technology, but we can't afford to keep up with technology. And why are they going to care about what we do? A very common theme. And I would say that connects right back to the planning. If we don't take the time to think about who we are and what we're going to do and where we're going, we won't figure out how to be relevant to a changing audience in a changing time. So that's a look at some of the feedback that came back from these folks. Thinking about technology, we can't escape it. Many of our users have come to expect that they can find out about us on the web and that they can gain access to our collections online. Technology is expensive and it requires constant updating. Should we aspire to the digitization of all of our collections, or what parts of our collections? And what does that look like? And what priority should we give to putting whatever part of our collections we can put online, to putting that on a shared database, like the one that the Publishers of American Heritage are starting up, so that John Doe in Des Moines can look up Civil War canteens and find where they are located in collections across the country. We're in a period of experimentation, and we shouldn't be afraid to try new things. The challenge is going to be to decide with shrinking resources which new things we try. And we'll be much better served as we try new things if we are relying on our collective experiences in helping to make those decisions. I'm impressed by the Washington County Historical Society's Every Name Index. When you type a name into the search box, it shows every place that that name appears in their collections. My name, Elliott, brought up 3 pages of results. I may have a distant cousin in Washington County. This is only an index, yet it's impressive. You also get a message that says this index doesn't contain the original records, but merely points you in the right direction. The research staff of the Washington County Historical Society can help you find more information about this record and other resources. So the website is really an enticement and an invitation to come in the front door of the Washington County Historical Society, but a great way to use technology to steer people to your resources. Social media, which Joe is going to talk with folks about, can help us get the word out at no cost. Tweeting is free and effective. Facebook, blogs, a great way to showcase your and your staff's expertise. And the fact of the matter is, we're all doing different things in this area, and the best thing we can do is share our experiences with what we're trying and select what we think is going to be best for each of our organizations and the people that we're serving. What will serve them best and what will help to develop the capacity of our organizations. Now, let's revisit funding. We're going to have to work towards more stable models of funding our operations, a perennial problem. We have much to build upon, which is more than many other states enjoy. I would say almost all other states enjoy. We're struggling with the effects of nearly 10 years of reductions to our base budget and infrastructure. And of course, the irony is, with the legacy funding, you get you have these rifle shots of money that do allow piloting and experimentation and innovation for projects, usually with 2-year sunsets. And that's great. I mean, it's really great to have that. Of course, it would be worse if we didn't have that. Meanwhile, the body is getting a little more emaciated, right? But I think we were very glad that we were able to get legacy funds out to every county in the state in the first biennium. And as long as it doesn't shriek with the Viking Stadium, it will be all right. The board and staff are currently evaluating all that we do with the goal of setting realistic priorities for the future. And we're facing the same challenge that I described earlier in terms of the range of things we do and the level to which we can aspire to do all of them. One way we have addressed reductions in funding for our traditional operations is to pull out work that can be identified as a discrete project and just thus be eligible for outside funding, such as a grant or corporate support. This doesn't apply to legacy amendment dollars because those dollars cannot replace state dollars, but it can apply to NEH and other federal and special project grants. We're also looking at ways to do some things differently or perhaps not at all. And this is another area where we can help each other and perhaps share some tasks, eliminate duplication, or maybe identify other partners who can help pick up some of the responsibility. we may come to see our current challenges as the opportunity not so much to shrink our organizations, but to rethink and reshape them. Third, interpretation. We must ensure that we are documenting what's happening now. I have had some organizations say that with the pressures on us, one of the things we have stopped doing is collecting, and especially collecting what may be of interest to the future. And we need to make sure that as we have documented the stories of our native peoples, the pioneers, and the first immigrants, we're doing the same for Minnesota's newest residents. In 1990, the largest proportion of foreign-born Minnesotans were from Laos. And there must be a lot of history behind that. In 2008, the largest proportion of foreign-born residents in Minnesota is from where? Mexico. So the fact that we all had different ideas about it is, I think, speaks to the fact that we have a lot of new, large immigrant communities. Why are they choosing Minnesota? How are they acclimating? At and what do they need from us? At MHS, we've recently articulated a goal to expand our audience to serve at-risk immigrant and youth. It's our job to help all Minnesotans see themselves in the stories we tell about Minnesota. Among the good work being done is an oral history project by Candy thanks. County Historical Society and the Hispanic Community, with a grant from the State Historic Records Advisory Board. I know we have some SHRAD members here. As well as a state granted aid. They've hired a member of the Hispanic community to conduct the interviews. We need to include people from the new immigrant communities to help us do the work of including them. And our collective story of Minnesota, as well as serving on our staff and boards, we need to make sure everybody can see themselves. I was reminded by that by one of our board members at a board meeting yesterday, as I looked around the room and there were 2 African Americans in a group of about 20, and 1 Native American, 1 Indian, no one from Somalia, no Hispanic. We all need to keep working at that. Fourth, partnerships. We've seen a flowering of creative projects through Minnesota as a result of the Legacy Amendment. Really wonderfully creative and substantive projects. Work that would have been impossible for any single entity to take on has been advanced thanks to this wonderful incentive for organizations to work together. Historical societies are no strangers to partnerships. We've been doing this for years. And we've had wonderful partners in schools and libraries. But we need to keep looking for opportunities to work with new kinds of organizations. An example is the Anoka County Historical Society, which worked with the Veterans Administration to help prepare for their exhibition on the Vietnam War. Staff received training, and the VA also provided counselors to help with reactions experienced by visitors, particularly Vietnam vets. Partnerships can have the added benefit of strengthening our communities and the understanding between peoples of diverse experiences and backgrounds. Fifth, and the last one of these areas I want to touch on is education. And in my mind, this point especially connects very strongly with the concern that this year's seminarians have for the future relevance. In so many ways, when you look at educational statistics for Minnesota, it's my understanding that across the state, we have about a 75% graduation rate overall. That in some areas, only 1/4 of African American males will graduate from high school. And that generally, the achievement gap between white and non-white in Minnesota is the largest of all the states. These are our neighbors and our constituents and people we serve. They're our future workforce. This is the generation that will determine whether Minnesota will be competitive or not nationally, whether our economy will thrive or not, whether we will have a tax base that will be able to support institutions like ours. We have a dog in this race. We've got a stake in this. We cannot sit back with our collections and in our libraries and not be out there actively seeking how we can be engaged with educators in our communities to serve not just those who are still in high school and participating in History Day and all of that, before they get to high school. What can we do with kids before they go off the rails in 6th grade and junior high school? What experiences can we offer them that have meaning, that are meaningful to them, that are engaging, may be hands-on, may provide a mentor or a role model that they lack, so that we are not only helping them, helping our communities in the state, but also strengthening our connections to these diverse communities and providing an audience for us in the future. To me, tackling this, being a partner in this, helping address this problem, helps us deal with some of our issues. And you know what? It is one of the best talking points when you're out raising money. Because it is meaningful and because everybody you're asking for money from recognize this problem and they're scared of it. They don't know what's going to happen to our state down the road. We can be a player in this, and most of us either in our personal backgrounds or in our organizations or in our communities have people who've got the educational chops and the creativity who can figure out how to connect us to this problem and these kids. And we need to chin up to it more than we have. So our organizations, especially local history organizations, are the front doors through which most Minnesotans first enter the past. The state's history is as diverse and unique as each city, town, and village. Together, we're a chorus of individual voices, each adding to the tone, the color, and the expression of life in our state. What all of our organizations have in common is stewardship of the legacy of our predecessors. And our charge as stewards of the state's history is to record and care for it and interpret it and to make it available and meaningful to every citizen of our state. I can't think of more important work. We do our work to help people today and in the future. What we preserve and the stories we tell, the stories of our Vietnam vets, the stories of the new Hispanic, our new Hispanic neighbors, help people to make sense of what has happened and gain a sense of purpose for the future. In a sometimes fractious world, we provide the neutral places to foster understanding and discussion. It's not always easy. At MHS, and we're going to have an opportunity here today to spend some time thinking about this, we're preparing for the 150th anniversary of the tragic events of 1862. And we're doing it by reaching not only into our archives, but also into the communities of Dakota people, both in Minnesota and those of the diaspora. We're calling it a process of truth recovery, moving our work beyond the antiquarian, simply continually inviting people to come in and look at what we have and to talk together about how one interprets the facts of what happened in 1862, what caused it, what was the aftermath. Well, you all have been very patient. For 39 years, I've been fortunate to work in a field I love with people like you, with colleagues I respect and enjoy. And for me, it's a real privilege to be a part of the Minnesota Historical Society and to be a new citizen of Minnesota and to be a part of this network of history organizations. I thank you for inviting me today. I hope as you have thoughts and ideas and feedback, and I hope constructive criticisms, that you would not ever hesitate to let me know, or any of my colleagues at the Historical Society. I'm very happy to be here today to have a chance to meet my new colleagues in Minnesota, and I very much look forward to working with you today and in the future. Thanks. And how about some questions or comments?